This project has been in the making for a rather long time, and I've changed up this intro more times than I could bother to count. Initially, it would ridicule people that were against vaccination and include a few mean jokes about the movement as a whole. But this isn't really the way to go here, especially if I'm willing to make a series of videos they would consider watching. Instead, I've gone on to try and explore why some people side with this viewpoint. First, the majority of people are simply misinformed. The human brain, no matter how advanced, is incapable of seeing the full truth of our world. Every idea that crosses our mind has to clash against everything else that already exists there. Most people tend to uncritically believe the ideas that are presented to them first rather than ones that make the most sense. If someone is introduced to vaccination with the premise that vaccines are bad, all their core beliefs about vaccination will form based on this premise. Any new information that they receive on the harm of vaccines will serve to further affirm their beliefs, and any conflicting information will be rejected. 2. A lot of parents are blinded by their fear for the child's safety. On the other end of the spectrum lies legitimate concern for the child's well-being. People outside of medical field don't have the necessary knowledge on what vaccines are and how dangerous they are, and it's actually quite tough to find good comprehensive material for parents to study. Many consult their doctors, but doctors also don't have enough time in their work schedule to give in-depth explanations of vaccinations to each and every parent. People are left with crumbs of info from their doctors and can look up a lot of bad things about vaccines on the internet. As a result, they are paralyzed with conflicting opinions and have no real way of developing their own understanding of the problem. And what you don't know, you fear. The easier option is to avoid vaccination in general, and unfortunately this poses a potential health and safety concern for their children. 3. False rationalizations. While some people may be blinded by fear, others are blinded by their own convictions and rationalizations. Most notably, there is the issue of natural immunity. Without proper understanding of vaccinations, many people choose to go the natural way, believing that contracting the disease without prior immunization will somehow create better immunity. These people fail to realize a few distinct ideas. You're not risking exposure to just one disease. Vaccination covers a myriad of pathogens these days, and it would take your child many months of being ill just to be immune to all of them. The diseases are not as pleasant as they may seem. Hepatitis B, as of today, is an incurable disease requiring lifelong treatment. Whooping cough is characterized by severe coughing, and it's so persistent it can leave your child unable to breathe for several minutes, which can lead to brain damage from lack of oxygen. Measles has a high rate of complications which are deadly in nature, and subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which is one of those complications, is 100% fatal and can develop 10 to 15 years after the infection. Most of the diseases are very contagious, meaning they are not only easy to contact if one has never been vaccinated, but unvaccinated children can also easily spread microbes to other unvaccinated children. Natural immunity is not better than vaccination, and there is no real evidence to support it. In general, this statement is true, but there are also some clarifications to be made from case to case when discussing individual diseases. There are a few diseases on the schedule that are once-in-a-lifetime thing. Chickenpox and measles are the most notable examples, as it's generally believed you can't suffer from them again thanks to immunity. The virus that causes chickenpox can take permanent residence in our body and cause another infection later on, zoster. Measles is a deadly disease with a high risk of complications. To develop the same kind of immunity, it takes a child 2 injections of MMR vaccine. Naturalistic movement in general seems to pose a high risk for becoming anti-vaxx. If you're a person who thinks in favor of naturalistic ideas, consider the following. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it's good or beneficial for you. Poisonous mushrooms are natural, yet it doesn't mean we should be eating them. It's simply unhealthy for us. Natural oils that are sold far and wide, which are marketed as beneficial for your immunity and growth, have never undergone proper clinical trials. There is no proof using the scientific method that they possess any of the listed effects. The opposite argument is also never true. Just because something is unnatural doesn't mean that it's bad. Most drugs that are currently on the market are synthetic. They've been synthesized in a lab, not harvested from a plant. And yet, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that these drugs help people recover from the most deadly conditions or improve their quality of life when facing chronic diseases. And on the contrary, drugs isolated from natural sources are not very benign. Warfarin, one of the most used anticoagulants worldwide, was isolated from a plant, and it was discovered because cows died of severe internal bleeding when they ate this plant. 4. They've been exposed to rumors of harm from close friends or experienced harm to their children firsthand. It's common for vaccines to be scapegoated when something terrible happens to a child. Some parents tend to do so because this could be the only thing they had perceived control over. Clinicians often report parents that blame vaccines for genetic disorders. Many of those don't have any distinct signs at birth, and so the child undergoes normal vaccinations. A few months or years down the line, symptoms start to show, such as slow physical and cognitive development. This disease was present in their child right from the start. It's as old as when the child was conceived. This is when the child's genetic material was mixed up, and now every cell in his body is affected by it. Every cell has abnormal DNA that results in existing symptoms. It's often impossible for the parents to comprehend this idea. Their child seemed fine to them, and now all of a sudden things are not okay. They weren't told that the child had this disorder at birth, but now they are told it has always been there. It's very easy for parents to scapegoat vaccines as the ultimate evil. After all, this is the only perceived thing in their child's development they could have done differently, not vaccinating their child. Despite their firm convictions that vaccines are to blame, there are obvious failures in their reasoning. To affect your whole body, genetic data would have to be affected very early on after conception. Despite the best advances in genetic engineering, it's simply impossible as of this day and age to develop something that will change DNA in every single cell of your body. Vaccines were administered after birth, when all of the child's organs are already developed and functioning. Certain diseases have a latent period where they develop but don't affect us. Cancer can take 10 to 20 years to start causing significant harm to one's body, and the same is true for genetic disorders. Their child was perceived as fine because they had no symptoms at the time, and therefore he was never tested for a disorder. Once the child's symptoms became obvious, the disease was diagnosed properly. Unfortunately, these parents can be absolutely oblivious to evidence of them being wrong and spread false rumors like wildfire. And obviously, there are legitimately sad cases where vaccines are the cause of serious complications. On average, serious adverse reactions such as anaphylaxis occur at a rate of about 1 in a million vaccinations. It's completely understandable that parents who get to see these reactions in their children will be afraid of receiving any further shots. Sadly, this is a category of parents highly unlikely to change their mind about vaccination. For those children, doctors take further precautions, such as not administering the same type of vaccine in general or using a shot from a different manufacturer. A short while back, I came across a beautiful thread asking why people have decided to give their children vaccines, and there are also some common themes involved. 1. They were shown the negative consequences of their choices. In the quote for this video, Benjamin Franklin regrets not vaccinating his child against smallpox. For some parents, they face a disease their child wasn't vaccinated against. Fear motivates most people to avoid vaccines, and unfortunately, fear for their child's well-being is what also makes them change their minds. 2. They faced the insanity of some anti-vaxxers. Many of the arguments provided by the anti-vaxx movement make little sense to a rational individual. Even a bit of research is often enough to realize that most of their points are groundless. Luckily, the negative influence of anti-vax movement sparks a wave of backwards resistance, resulting in free promotion for vaccination. 3. They were provided the necessary information on vaccines. Sometimes people do come across good sources, and sometimes doctors are able to provide the necessary information for parents and clear up any confusions. 4. Their concern for the safety of their children took a turn towards vaccination. This concern can honestly go any way, either for or against vaccines. Luckily, their eyes open up eventually. But people don't instantly become supporters or haters of vaccination. Most people are completely oblivious to what vaccines are and why we need them. As every bad movement starts, there was legitimate concern somewhere deep beneath all the faulty beliefs that formed around vaccines. Somewhere at the bottom, there were a bunch of parents that simply wanted to know if their choices would benefit or harm their children. And back in the day, vaccines did pose a higher risk of complications than they do today. The movement blew a little out of proportion, and as a result of it, we see children suffer again and again from preventable diseases, all out of sheer ignorance or misinformation. People that choose to spread false rumors tend to completely disregard any and all scientific achievements in favor of blindly trusting resources that simply want your attention and clicks on their websites to push ads. Same websites will readily tell you how vaccines are bad and how there are measles outbreaks going on around the world. My point being, I wish people had a trustworthy resource to clear any confusion that they have regarding vaccines. For some people, those are their doctors, but they don't always have the time and patience to address every concern the parent might have. So, for this reason, I want to provide the basic necessary information on vaccination in this guide. Who am I? I'm a med school graduate that's unhappy with people making poor life choices. And while dedicating hours upon hours working on a video series that'll be viewed by no one is probably a poor life choice of my own, there is a far bigger issue out there. Generally, I wouldn't bother with people making poor life choices. After all, some of them hold our demographics together. But there is also something peculiar about the anti-vax movement. First of all, it's people making the decision for someone else, not for themselves. I'm more than okay with people screwing up only to realize the kind of price they're paying, but this is someone else who will have to suffer because of them. While those people will rationalize their decisions to a point where they think they made the right choice, kids who suffer from preventable diseases will not be happy about it. Second, mass vaccination prevents diseases from spreading, which means that not only will you protect your child from it, you'll stop it from spreading to other people who can't get vaccinated for valid medical reasons. And third, I'm pissed about people spreading false rumors about vaccines and how everyone is brainwashed except them, while demonstrating just how little knowledge on the subject they actually have. This is a guide dedicated to providing legitimate information on vaccination and infectious diseases as it's taught in medical school. In the end, it's impossible to convince someone they are completely wrong and reverse their decision. My goal with this is to try and educate you on why we vaccinate kids, how it works, what diseases we're trying to prevent, and how truly dangerous vaccines are. I will be trying to make this information as accessible to everyone as possible, so hopefully you will be able to understand the gist of things without any prior knowledge of microbiology, immunology, and medicine. If this information convinces you to vaccinate your children, amazing. If you're just looking to enhance your knowledge about infectious diseases, that's great as well. If you're just bored and want to watch something educational, by all means do. Let's briefly talk about the plan. First of all, you'll need a basic introduction to infectious diseases. Then, we'll dive a little bit into how our immune system works, aka why you've had colds previously and why you are still alive. And finally, we'll go over every disease we're currently vaccinating against, how said diseases progress, what exactly the vaccine does, and what are the potential risks of vaccination. Some disclaimers before we start. All this information provided is how it's taught in med school. It's based on courses of microbiology, immunology, infectious diseases, and epidemiology. 2. You can consider my perspective skewed because I'm 100% for vaccinating children, but completely aware that there are also certain dangers associated with them. In my opinion, the benefits far outweigh the risks, and this is the prime reason I'm making this. It feels like the biggest problem with anti-vax movement is that they're too focused on the dangers and have absolutely no perspective on how beneficial vaccines are. 3. English is not my mother tongue. I've studied all of this in a different language, so you may not hear certain things using correct English medical terms. Maybe this will be intentional to avoid using difficult terms and try to explain it simpler for your understanding. Maybe it'll just be me being lazy and not looking up a proper word. I will make sure to get the general idea across in terms that you can comprehend, and for any unknown terms, I will provide you with the necessary definitions. 4. This is a non-profit affair. I'm not affiliated with anybody who makes or sells vaccines, or essential oils for that matter, and I gain no financial or any other kind of benefit from doing any of this. 5. Any images you see within these videos are taken from Google searches. I've no idea if any of them are copyrighted, so if any of them are, do let me know and I'll give credit or remove them and re-upload the videos. This also covers the clinical manifestations. I'll show you pictures and videos of what certain symptoms look like. Those are all again taken from Google searches, and I have no idea who those patients are. 6. Many resources will offer more extensive knowledge on all of these problems. My goal is to compress this as much as possible into bits that are quick and easy to understand. This talk isn't about exploring every single bit of detail, but rather trying to form a basic understanding of the who's and what's of vaccination. By the end of the series, I hope that you'll receive some crucial information on an important decision. Should you be vaccinating your children?